Amelia Hawthorne's hands were still shaking from the pregnancy test when she found the withdrawal slip. It was tucked inside Edward's briefcase, the Mont Blanc leather one she'd given him for their second anniversary. She hadn't been snooping. She'd been looking for his passport, because they were supposed to fly to Barcelona next month for their delayed honeymoon, the one they'd postponed twice because Edward was building something important. The slip was dated 3 hours ago. Checking account number 4472, withdrawal $847,392.16. Balance $0.00. Amelia read it twice, then 3 times. That was their account, the joint account, the one with both their names, the one that held everything they'd saved, everything they'd built, everything that was supposed to be theirs. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and logged into their banking app. Checking, $0. Savings, $0. Investment account, closed. The pregnancy test was still on the bathroom counter, those 2 pink lines that were supposed to change everything. Amelia had bought baby shoes, tiny leather Oxfords that cost more than she should have spent, but Edward loved expensive things, and she wanted him to understand immediately what those 2 lines meant. The dining room table was set. Lamb roasted with rosemary and garlic, the recipe Edward's mother had given her, with the grudging admission that it's edible, I suppose. Candles from the boutique downtown, his favorite Bordeaux breathing in a crystal decanter. Amelia heard his car in the driveway. She walked to the foyer, the withdrawal slip clutched in one hand, the pregnancy test hidden in her pocket, like a grenade she wasn't sure she should throw. Edward opened the door, and he wasn't alone. 3 men followed him inside, their laughter preceding them like weather. Amelia recognized them immediately. Oliver Grant, whose hedge fund had just closed its 3rd 9-figure quarter, Sebastian Price, who owned half the waterfront developments in the city, and Julian Pembroke, whose family name was carved into the opera house, the museum, and the hospital wing where Amelia's mother had died. Edward saw her and smiled, not the warm smile from their wedding photos, but something thinner, sharper. The smile of a man who'd already made a decision and was waiting for everyone else to catch up. "Amelia," he said, brushing past her to hang his coat, "get us drinks, the Macallan 25, and use the Waterford crystal, not the everyday glasses." Oliver was already settling into the leather armchair, Edward's chair, the one Amelia wasn't allowed to sit in. Sebastian kicked off his shoes, leaving muddy prints on the Persian rug Amelia had spent 4 hours cleaning that morning. Julian was checking his phone, his thumb scrolling with the bored efficiency of someone used to dismissing things. But then Julian looked up, and his eyes met Amelia's. For just a moment, something flickered across his face. Not quite sympathy, but recognition, like he was seeing her for the first time as an actual person instead of decorative furniture. He looked away quickly. "Edward," Amelia said quietly, her voice barely cutting through their noise, "can we talk privately?" "Nothing private about this conversation," Edward said, loosening his tie and dropping onto the sofa as he'd just finished a marathon. "In fact, that's the whole point. Witnesses." The withdrawal slip felt like it was burning through her palm. What conversation? Edward reached into his briefcase, the same one where Amelia had found the evidence of her financial execution, and pulled out a manila envelope. He tossed it on the coffee table between them. "Sign these." Amelia didn't move. "What are they?" "Divorce papers. My lawyer filed them this morning. You're being served right now, in front of these gentlemen, so there's no ambiguity about the timeline." He poured himself 3 fingers of scotch without offering her any. "I'm done with this experiment." The room tilted. Amelia gripped the back of the sofa to steady herself. "Experiment?" "The marriage," Edward said, swirling his glass, studying the amber liquid as if it were more interesting than his wife's face. I thought maybe love was enough. Turns out it's not even currency." Oliver laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Christ, Edward, you're really doing this tonight?" "Why wait?" Edward gestured at Amelia with his glass. "Look at her. She brings nothing to the table. No family connections, no portfolio, no education worth mentioning. She worked at a catering company when I met her. She made appetizers." Sebastian whistled low. "Brutal." "Honest," Edward corrected. "My accountant ran the numbers. Keeping her costs more than she generates. She's a liability I can't afford anymore." Julian hadn't spoken. He was staring at his glass, jaw tight, like he was trying very hard not to say something. "To cutting dead weight," Sebastian said, raising his glass. Oliver joined the toast. Julian did not. Amelia's vision was blurring at the edges. This wasn't real. This was a nightmare with the texture of reality, the kind where you're screaming but no sound comes out. Amelia looked at Edward, searching for the man who'd proposed to her in the rain, who'd promised her forever, who'd held her when her mother died and whispered that he'd never leave her alone. That man wasn't in this room. "The accounts," Amelia whispered. "You emptied them." "My accounts," Edward said, "established with my capital. My lawyers made sure the paperwork was airtight. You're entitled to nothing." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with the precise movements of someone performing surgery. "You have 20 minutes to pack. After that, I'm calling the police and reporting you for trespassing." "Edward, She stopped herself, suddenly aware of the audience, of Oliver's smirk, Sebastian's phone camera pointed at her, of Julian's careful stillness, like he was a statue trying not to crumble. She couldn't tell him about the baby. Not here, not like this. "You're what?" Edward's voice was ice wrapped in silk. "Shocked? Hurt? Going to cry?" He stepped closer, and Amelia could smell the scotch on his breath, the cologne that used to make her feel safe. The pregnancy test felt like lead in her pocket.
Amelia looked at the three men on the sofa. Oliver was filming now, his phone angled to capture her face. Sebastian was texting someone, probably his wife, sharing the entertainment. Julian was staring at Edward as if he'd never seen him before, like something fundamental had shifted and he couldn't look away from the wreckage. She looked at the manila envelope on the coffee table, divorce papers with her name misspelled, Amelia instead of Amelia. Edward hadn't even cared enough to check. She looked at the baby shoes, still wrapped in tissue paper on the dining room sideboard, next to the lamb that was getting cold, and the candles that were burning down to nothing. And she made a decision that would define the next decade of her life. "Give me the pen," Amelia said. Edward smiled, genuinely smiled, as if she'd finally done something right. He handed her a Mont Blanc fountain pen, the one she'd saved 3 months of catering tips to buy him. Amelia signed every page without reading them. Her signature was steady. Her hand didn't shake. When she finished, Edward took the papers and tucked them back into his briefcase with the same casual efficiency he used to discard restaurant receipts. 20 minutes, he reminded her. "Don't make me call the police." Amelia walked upstairs to the bedroom they'd shared for 3 years. She packed methodically, clothes, toiletries, the photograph of her grandmother, Margaret, the recipe box that had survived 2 generations of Hawthorne women. She left her wedding ring on the dresser. She left the framed photo of their honeymoon face down. She left every gift Edward had ever given her, except for one thing: the leather journal where she'd kept notes on every business conversation she'd ever overheard in this house. Every deal Oliver had bragged about, every property Sebastian was targeting, every investment Julian's family was quietly liquidating. 3 years of invisible note-taking, 3 years of being dismissed as furniture while the men who mattered talked about money. Amelia tucked the journal into her suitcase beneath her grandmother's recipes. When she came backstairs, Edward was checking his watch. 18 minutes. Impressive. "The car keys," Amelia said.
That's my car, registered in my name. Everything here is in my name. Did you really think you owned anything?" The rain was falling hard now, turning the driveway into a black mirror. Amelia stood at the door with her suitcase and her grandmother's recipe box, looking back at the life she'd built. Edward was already pouring another round of drinks for his friends. Julian was standing now, his drink abandoned on the side table. "Edward," he said quietly, "this is none of your concern," Edward cut him off. "Unless you'd like to leave with her?" Julian's jaw worked. For a moment, Amelia thought he might actually say something, might do something. But then he looked at Oliver and Sebastian, at Edward's cold smile, at the cost of opposing a man like this. He sat back down. Amelia walked into the rain alone, but as she reached the gate, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. Julian Pembroke was standing on the porch, his expensive shoes getting ruined by the rain. He held out something, a business card already soaked. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was barely audible over the downpour. "I should have said something. I should have—" He stopped. "If you need anything, a reference, a loan, anything, call me." Amelia looked at the card, then at Julian's face, younger than she'd realized, maybe only 30, with the kind of eyes that suggested he hadn't learned to stop caring yet. "Why?" asked Amelia. "Because what he just did was monstrous, and I sat there and let it happen. So if there's any way I can—" He stopped again. "You don't deserve this. Any of this." Amelia took the card. Their fingers touched for a moment, his warm, hers freezing. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she turned and walked into the rain, Julian Pembroke's business card tucked in her pocket next to the pregnancy test that would change everything. She didn't know it yet, but that card would become her lifeline, and Julian Pembroke would become the only man she'd ever trust again. The bleeding started on the bus. Amelia was 20 minutes into the ride downtown when she felt the cramping, low and vicious, like something vital was tearing loose inside. She pressed her hand against her stomach and felt wetness seeping through her dress. The woman next to her noticed. "Honey, are you okay?" Amelia shook her head. She couldn't speak. If she opened her mouth, she'd scream. "Driver," the woman's voice cut through the diesel rumble. "She needs a hospital." The bus lurched to a stop 3 blocks from County General. Amelia stumbled off with her suitcase and her grandmother's recipe box, leaving a dark stain on the plastic seat. The rain soaked through her coat in seconds. Her broken wheel scraped against the pavement, throwing sparks. County General's emergency room smelled of disinfectant and desperation. Amelia collapsed at the intake desk, and a nurse with tired eyes took one look at her and called for a wheelchair. "How far along?" asked the nurse as she pushed Amelia through swinging doors. 6 weeks. "Bleeding heavily?" "Yes." "When did it start?" 20 minutes ago. Amelia gripped the wheelchair arms. "Am I losing them?" The nurse's hands stilled on the wheelchair handles. "Them?" "Twins. The test said—" Amelia's voice cracked. "Is it normal to bleed with twins?" "Let's get you examined." The ultrasound technician was gentle. She moved the wand across Amelia's stomach in slow, searching circles, while staring at a screen Amelia couldn't see. The silence stretched too long. Amelia counted heartbeats, her own rabbiting pulse, and then, impossibly, 2 others.
"There," the technician said softly, turning the screen. 2 tiny flickers of light, beating in perfect sync. "Your boys are fine. The bleeding is a subchorionic hematoma. Scary, but not dangerous. You need bed rest and hydration." "Boys?" whispered Amelia. "Too early to tell for sure, but the positioning suggests fraternal twins. Congratulations." Amelia started crying, and she couldn't stop. Not from relief, from the crushing arithmetic of survival. She had $43 in her wallet, no insurance, no home, no husband, and 2 lives growing inside her that deserved better than a mother who'd been thrown away like garbage. The hospital social worker was named Patricia, and she had the exhausted competence of someone who'd seen every variation of human tragedy. She sat on the edge of Amelia's gurney and handed her a folder stuffed with pamphlets. "You need prenatal care," Patricia said. "I can get you enrolled in Medicaid, but the application takes 6 weeks. In the meantime, there's a free clinic on Monroe Street that sees pregnant women." "I need a place to stay," Amelia said. "There are shelters. I can make calls." "I need a job." Patricia's expression shifted, something harder, more honest. "Honey, you're high risk with twins. Most places won't hire you this pregnant. Do you have family?" Amelia thought about her mother, dead from cancer 3 years ago. Her father had gone before she could form memories. Her grandmother Margaret, who'd raised her on stories and stubbornness until she died when Amelia was 19. Then she thought about Julian Pembroke's business card, soaked and crumpled in her coat pocket. "Maybe," Amelia said quietly. "Maybe I do." Amelia waited 3 days before calling the number on Julian's card. 3 days in a shelter where she slept with her suitcase chained to her wrist and her grandmother's recipe box pressed against her chest. 3 days of stale bread and watered-down soup, of women with haunted eyes and children who'd learned not to cry too loud. 3 days of trying to convince herself she could survive this alone. On the 4th morning, she walked to a payphone outside a gas station and dialed. "Pembroke," Julian answered on the 2nd ring. "It's Amelia Hawthorne." Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "I gave you my card at Edward's house in the rain." Silence. Then, "Are you okay?" The question hit her like a physical thing. Nobody had asked her that. Not the shelter workers, not the hospital staff, not the social worker who'd handed her pamphlets and walked away. "No," Amelia said, and her voice broke. "I'm not okay." "Where are you?" She told him, the shelter address, the cross streets, and the fact that she was using a payphone because she couldn't afford to keep her cell service active. "Stay there," Julian said. "I'm 20 minutes away." "You don't have to." 20 minutes, he repeated and hung up. Julian arrived in 19 minutes, driving a BMW that looked like it cost more than most houses. When he got out wearing jeans and a sweater that somehow still looked expensive, and when he saw Amelia standing on the corner with her broken suitcase, his expression crumpled. "Jesus, Amelia." She must have looked like a ghost. She'd lost 8 pounds in 4 days. Her clothes hung off her frame. Her hair was unwashed. Her eyes had the hollow look of someone who'd stopped sleeping because sleep meant vulnerability. "I'm pregnant," she said, because she needed him to know before he offered anything. "Twins. I was going to tell Edward that night, but—" She gestured vaguely, encompassing everything: the divorce, the rain, the destruction of her entire life. "So if you're offering help out of pity or guilt or whatever this is, you should know I come with complications." Julian was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up her suitcase and her grandmother's recipe box and put them in his trunk. "Get in the car," he said gently. "Let's find you somewhere safe." Julian took her to a furnished apartment in a quiet neighborhood, not luxury, but clean and safe, with windows that locked and a bathroom that didn't smell like mildew. He paid 6 months' rent in advance before Amelia could protest. "I can't accept this," Amelia said, standing in the middle of the empty living room with her arms wrapped around her. "I can't pay you back." "I'm not asking you to." Julian set her suitcase by the door. "Consider it a loan. When you're back on your feet, we'll figure out terms." "Why are you doing this?" Julian was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the street below. "I've known Edward for 10 years. We went to business school together. I watched him become what he is. And that night, when he stopped, jaw tight. I should have said something. I should have stopped it. But I sat there like a coward and let him destroy you. You're not responsible for what he did."
"No," Julian agreed. "But I'm responsible for what I didn't do." He turned to face her. "So let me do this, please." Amelia looked at him, really looked at him. Julian Pembroke was handsome in the way old money made people handsome. Good bones, better grooming, the kind of polish that came from generations of resources. But there was something else in his eyes, something that looked like genuine shame. "Okay," she said finally, "but this is a loan. I'll pay you back, every penny." Julian smiled, and it transformed his face into something younger, less burdened. "I believe you." He left her with a refrigerator stocked with groceries, a phone with 6 months of prepaid service, and a promise to check in next week. Amelia stood alone in her new apartment and let herself feel safe for the first time in 4 days. Then she opened her grandmother's recipe box and got to work. Amelia Hawthorne died in the paperwork of her new bank account. In her place, a woman named Vivienne Crossley was born. It started as protection. Edward had lawyers, connections, and the kind of vindictive ego that would ruin her before she could even begin. But it became something more. Vivienne Crossley didn't have a history of failed marriage or shelter survival. Vivienne Crossley was a ghost in the boardroom, and ghosts don't bleed. She started with catering, using the groceries Julian had bought her and her grandmother's recipes. Small corporate events, graduation parties, weekend weddings. The checks got bigger, the clients got richer, and Vivienne learned that wealthy people loved authenticity, as long as it came with the right presentation. Julian became her first recurring client. His family hosted quarterly charity galas, and he hired Vivienne for all of them. At first, she thought it was pity. Then she realized he was giving her access to his network, his connections, the kind of wealthy people who could make or break a catering business. "You're talented," he told her after the third event, as they were cleaning up together. "This food is exceptional." "My grandmother's recipes," Amelia admitted. She'd been Vivienne for so long now that using her real name with Julian felt like a secret shared. "Then your grandmother was an artist." Julian handed her a glass of wine, the good stuff, the bottle that cost more than her weekly grocery budget. "But you're the one who saw the potential. That's not inheritance, that's vision." By the time Theo and Arthur were born, 7 weeks early, screaming and perfect in the NICU, Vivienne Crossley had $50,000 in her business account. Julian was there at the hospital, pacing the waiting room with Amelia while the twins fought for every breath in their incubators. "They're going to be okay," he said, gripping her hand. "They're fighters, like their mother." Amelia looked at their joined hands and felt something dangerous bloom in her chest, something that felt like trust, maybe something more. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "Don't thank me yet," Julian said, smiling through his exhaustion. "Wait until you see how much trouble 2 boys can cause." By year 5, Vivienne Crossley Consulting existed in paper and in practice. Amelia had pivoted from catering to business consulting, offering operational efficiency analysis to struggling companies. She had a gift for seeing what others missed: redundant departments, bloated contracts, executives coasting on legacy. And Julian was her silent partner. Not financially, Amelia refused to take more money from him, but strategically. He made introductions, he vouched for her credibility, he taught her the language of old money, the unspoken codes that opened doors. They had dinner once a month, always professional, always bounded by the careful distance Amelia maintained, because she couldn't afford to blur lines, because Julian Pembroke was from a world that had destroyed her once, and she couldn't risk letting him too close. The night everything changed started with a business dinner that turned personal. They were at an upscale restaurant celebrating Vivienne Crossley Consulting's biggest contract yet, a $2 million turnaround for a manufacturing company. Julian had insisted on champagne, and Amelia had allowed herself 3 glasses,
just enough to soften the edges of her usual guardedness. "To 7 years," Julian said, raising his glass, "from a recipe box to an empire." Amelia laughed. "Hardly an empire, but we're getting there." "We?" Julian's smile was careful, testing. "I mean, I couldn't have done this without you." "You could have." Julian leaned back in his chair, his expression serious now. "You're the most determined person I've ever met. You would have found a way." "Maybe," Amelia traced the rim of her glass, "but it would have taken longer, been harder. You gave me a chance when no one else would. I gave you an apartment and some introductions. You did the rest." The silence between them shifted, becoming something heavier, more charged. Amelia could feel the question forming in Julian's eyes, the one he'd been careful never to ask for 7 years. "Why do you do this? Why help me? You don't owe me anything." "Don't I?" Julian's voice was quiet. "I watched Edward destroy you. I had the power to stop it, and I didn't. That debt doesn't expire just because I paid your rent for a few months." "That's guilt talking, not—" Amelia stopped. "Not what?" Julian leaned forward. "Say it." "Not friendship, not whatever this is." Julian was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face. "What if it's both? What if I helped you because I felt guilty, and then stayed because I—" He stopped, started again. "You're remarkable, Amelia. Not Vivienne the consultant. You, the woman who survived something that would have broken most people and turned it into strength." Amelia's heart was racing. "Julian, he's not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I know you've built walls for good reason. I just wanted you to know that for me, this stopped being about guilt about 5 years ago." "Then what is it about?" Julian smiled, soft, genuine, devastating. "I think you know." Amelia did know. She'd known for years, and she'd been carefully ignoring it because falling for Julian Pembroke was dangerous. He was from Edward's world. He was old money and boarding schools and the kind of privilege that made people casual about cruelty. But he'd also been in her corner for 7 years. He'd held her hand in the NICU. He'd taught Theo and Arthur how to tie neckties and throw a baseball. He'd never asked for anything except the chance to be present in her life.
"I'm not ready," Amelia said honestly. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready for—" She gestured between them. "This." "I know." Julian reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm not going anywhere. When you're ready, if you're ready, I'll still be here." Amelia looked at their joined hands and let herself feel the warmth without pulling away. Maybe, she thought. Maybe someday. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. Amelia's phone lit up with Julian's name, and she answered immediately, her heart already racing. Julian never called this late unless something was wrong. "I need to tell you something." His voice was tight, controlled, the way it got when he was holding back emotion. "And you're going to be angry." Amelia sat up, fully awake now. "What happened?" "Edward's company is failing, spectacularly. He's about $15 million in debt. His investors are fleeing, and his second marriage just imploded." Julian paused. "He called me today, asked if I knew anyone in private equity who might be interested in a rescue investment." Amelia's blood went cold. "And?" "I told him I'd ask around." Another pause, longer this time. "Amelia, he doesn't know about Vivienne Crossley. He doesn't know you're the one who—" "Who what?" Amelia's voice was ice. "Who could save him? Who has the capital to throw him a lifeline?" "Yes. And you're telling me this because—" "Because I know what you're thinking," Julian said quietly, "and I'm asking you not to do it." Amelia got out of bed and walked to the window. The city sprawled below her penthouse apartment, the one she'd earned, the empire she'd built from nothing. "You don't know what I'm thinking. You're thinking this is your chance to face him, to show him what he threw away, to make him beg." Julian's voice cracked.
and I'm telling you it's not worth it." "How do you know what it's worth to me?" "Because I know you." Julian sounded exhausted. "I've watched you build this life, and it's extraordinary. You're happy. Theo and Arthur are thriving. You don't need revenge to prove you've won." "This isn't about revenge." Amelia pressed her forehead against the cold glass. "It's about justice." "Justice for what? Edward destroyed himself. His company is failing because he's incompetent and reckless, not because of anything you did. You don't owe him your time, your energy, or your mercy." "I'm not planning to show mercy." "That's what scares me." Julian's voice softened. "Amelia, if you do this, if you drag yourself back into his orbit, it's going to cost you. Maybe not financially, but emotionally. And I don't want to watch him hurt you again." "He can't hurt me anymore." "Can't he?" Julian asked. "Or are you still bleeding from wounds you've been too stubborn to admit?" The question hit harder than Amelia expected. She closed her eyes. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to let him fall. I want you to walk away and never look back." He hesitated. "But if you can't do that, if you need this, then I'll be there, every step. I won't let you face him alone." "Why?" Amelia whispered. "Why would you stand by me through this?" "Because I love you." Julian said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I've loved you for 7 years, and I'll love you through whatever comes next, even if it's this." Amelia's breath caught. "Julian, you don't have to say it back. You don't have to feel the same way. I just needed you to know that whatever you decide, I'm not going anywhere." Amelia stood at the window for a long time after they hung up, Julian's words echoing in her head. "I love you." And the terrifying part was, she loved him too. Edward's meeting was scheduled at 4 p.m. on a Thursday. Amelia, Vivienne, arranged for him to wait. She had Julian's words in her head, "It's not worth it," her son's faces in her memory, "Mom, are you okay?" and a decade of rage in her chest that demanded release. She made Edward wait 3 hours. When she finally entered the conference room at 6:47 p.m., Julian was with her, not as her attorney or her business partner, but as the man who'd promised to stand beside her through whatever came next. Edward stood when she walked in, his practiced smile already in place. Then he saw her face, and the smile died. "Amelia?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Hello, Edward." Vivienne sat at the head of the table, Julian beside her. "Thank you for your patience. Shall we discuss your debt?" Edward collapsed into his chair. His eyes darted between Vivienne and Julian, trying to understand. "You two? You're working together?" "We've been working together for 9 years. Julian made the introduction after you threw me out. He's been remarkably helpful." Julian said nothing, but his hand moved to rest on the table near Amelia's, not touching but close, a reminder that he was there. "I don't understand." Edward's voice was strangled. "You're Vivienne Crossley? You built all this?" "With Julian's help, yes." Vivienne slid the folder across the table. "Your financials are catastrophic. Your company is worth less than your office furniture. You have 90 days before bankruptcy." Edward opened the folder with shaking hands, page after page of his failures, itemized with surgical precision. "You're enjoying this," Edward said, looking up at her. "Watching me suffer." "No," Vivienne said steadily. "I'm not enjoying it. I'm just not stopping it." "What does that mean?" "It means I could save your company. I have the capital, the expertise, the network. I could throw you a lifeline." Vivienne leaned forward. "But I'm choosing not to." "Because you hate me?" "No." Vivienne glanced at Julian, and something passed between them. Understanding, support, love. "Because I've built something better, and spending my resources on saving you means taking them away from people who actually deserve them." Edward's face crumpled. "I made a mistake. I was cruel and stupid and—" "You were those things," Vivienne agreed, "but that's not why I'm saying no." "Then why?" Because your company isn't worth saving. Vivienne stood. The fundamentals are rotten. Your leadership is compromised. Your reputation is irresalvageable. She paused. I don't make emotional investments, Edward. I make profitable ones. You're neither. Please, Edward's voice broke. Amelia, please, I'm begging you. Don't, Julian spoke for the first time, his voice cold. Don't beg her for mercy you never showed. Don't ask her to save you when you threw her away pregnant and penniless. Don't. Julian, Amelia's hand touched his arm gently. It's okay. She looked at Edward one last time. I was pregnant that night, the night you called me trash and threw me into the rain. I was 6 weeks pregnant with twins. Edward went white. I have children? No, Amelia's voice was firm. You have genetic material. I have children, Theo and Arthur. They're 10 now, brilliant, kind, everything you'll never be. She walked toward the door. They don't know your name, and they never will. Amelia, wait. But she was already gone, Julian at her side, leaving Edward Blackwood to drown in the ruins of his own making.
They didn't speak in the elevator. Julian kept his hand at the small of Amelia's back, steady, grounding, while she tried to remember how to breathe. When they reached the parking garage, Amelia stopped walking. I thought it would feel different, she said quietly. How did you want it to feel? Satisfying, triumphant, like I'd finally won. Amelia laughed bitterly. Instead, I just feel empty. Julian turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. That's because revenge doesn't fill the holes people leave behind. It just reminds you they're there. Then what does fill them? This. Julian gestured between them. Building something new, letting people love you, trusting that you deserve good things. Amelia looked up at him, at Julian Pembroke, who'd spent 9 years proving he was nothing like Edward, who'd held her hand in hospital waiting rooms and taught her sons how to be good men, who'd loved her patiently while she rebuilt herself from ashes. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? Of this. Of you. Of letting someone close enough to hurt me again. Julian cupped her face in his hands. I can't promise I won't hurt you. People who love each other hurt each other sometimes. It's inevitable. His thumb brushed her cheek. But I can promise I'll never throw you away. I'll never make you feel worthless. And I'll spend every day proving you were worth waiting for. Amelia felt the walls she'd built start to crack. Really crack. Not just the small fissures that had been forming over the years, but fundamental structural damage that would bring the whole thing down. I love you, she whispered. I've loved you for years, and it terrifies me. Julian smiled, that devastating, gentle smile that made her believe in good things. Then let's be terrified together. He kissed her in the parking garage, and it felt like falling and flying at the same time, like the first breath after drowning, like coming home to a place she'd never known existed. When they broke apart, Amelia was crying. I need to tell the boys. About Edward. About everything. They're old enough to understand. Do you want me there? Amelia thought about Theo and Arthur, her brilliant, sensitive boys who'd grown up asking why they didn't have a father like other kids. She'd always told them the truth, just not all of it. Your father couldn't stay, but it wasn't your fault. It was never your fault. Yes, she said, I want you there. That night, Amelia sat Theo and Arthur down in the living room of the penthouse they'd worked so hard to afford. Julian was beside her on the sofa, close enough to touch, but letting her lead. We need to talk about your father, Amelia began. Theo and Arthur exchanged glances. They were 10 now, old enough to understand more than Amelia had given them credit for, old enough to have asked questions she'd been deflecting for years. We know his name, Theo said quietly. Arthur found your old wedding album in the storage unit.
We saw the photos. Amelia's heart stuttered. When? 6 months ago. Arthur looked down at his hands. We didn't want to upset you, so we didn't say anything, but we know his name is Edward Blackwood, and we know he left before we were born. He didn't just leave. Amelia forced herself to meet their eyes. He threw me out. He emptied our bank accounts, served me divorce papers in front of his friends, and told me I was worthless. I was 6 weeks pregnant with both of you when he did it. The boys were silent, processing. So he's a bad person, Theo said finally. He made bad choices, Amelia corrected carefully, and those choices hurt me deeply, but they also led me here, to you two, to this life, to becoming someone I'm proud of. Do you hate him? Arthur asked. Amelia considered the question honestly. I did. For a long time I hated him so much it felt like poison, but tonight I saw him again, and I realized I don't hate him anymore. I just don't care about him. He's not part of our story. What about Uncle Julian? Theo looked at Julian with the careful assessment kids use when they're trying to protect their parents. Is he part of our story? Julian glanced at Amelia, waiting for permission. She nodded. I'd like to be, if that's okay with all of you. Are you going to marry your mom? Arthur asked bluntly. Arthur? Amelia felt her face heat. But Julian laughed, warm and genuine. I haven't asked her yet, but if I did, and if she said yes, would that be okay with you? The boys looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations only twins can have. You'd have to teach us how to surf, Theo said finally. You promised last summer, but we never went. And you'd have to keep taking us to the science museum, even the boring exhibits. And you can't be mean to Mom. Theo's voice turned serious. Ever. Not like our father was. Julian's expression softened. I promise. All of it. Okay then, Arthur shrugged with the casual acceptance of a 10-year-old. You can marry her. Amelia laughed through tears. Do I get a say in this? Do you want to marry him? Theo asked. Amelia looked at Julian, at the man who'd stood beside her through everything, who'd loved her patiently while she learned to trust again, who'd helped her raise her sons, and never once asked for credit. Yes, she said, I really do. Julian proposed on a Tuesday, not at a fancy restaurant or a scenic overlook, not with a flash mob or a skywriter. He proposed in Amelia's kitchen while she was making her grandmother's tamales for a board meeting the next day, her hands covered in masa and her hair falling out of its bun. Marry me, he said, setting down the dishcloth he'd been using to dry her grandmother's recipe box, the one that had survived everything and led to this moment. Amelia looked up, startled. What? Julian pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple platinum band with a single emerald, the exact color of the stone from her grandmother's brooch. Marry me, not because you need rescuing, not because I spent 9 years earning it, but because we've built something real and I want to spend the rest of my life building more with you. Amelia's hands were shaking again, but this time from joy instead of fear. The ring, she whispered, it's from the emerald in your grandmother's brooch, the one you sold to start over. Julian smiled. I tracked it down, bought it back, and had it reset. Seemed appropriate.
Amelia started crying. Those messy, ugly, happy tears that come when something is so right you can't contain it. Yes, she said, not caring that her hands were dirty or that the tamales were burning or that this wasn't the elegant proposal she'd imagined as a young girl. Yes, I'll marry you. Julian slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her in the kitchen while Theo and Arthur cheered from the doorway, because of course they'd been eavesdropping, because 10-year-olds are terrible at secrets. And for the first time in a decade, Amelia Hawthorne felt complete. Not because a man had saved her, but because she'd saved herself, and then let someone worthy stand beside her in the life she'd built.
The wedding was small, just family and the handful of friends who'd helped Amelia rebuild her life. No press, no society photographers, no spectacle. Patricia from the hospital's social worker's office came. Vernon, the landlord who'd given her that first terrible apartment, came wearing his best suit and crying through the ceremony. Mr. Chen from the jewelry district came and gave her back the original receipt for the brooch, framed as a wedding gift. Theo and Arthur were co-best men, wearing matching tuxedos and carrying the rings with the solemnity of children who understood how significant this moment was. And when the officiant asked if anyone objected, no one spoke. Because this wasn't a fairy tale about a prince rescuing a princess. This was a story about a woman who'd been thrown away like garbage, who'd survived on $43 and a recipe box, who'd built an empire from nothing and learned to trust again. This was a story about a man who'd made one good choice a decade ago, to offer his card in the rain, and then spent 9 years proving he meant it. This was a story about two boys who'd grown up without a father, but were never once unloved. As Julian and Amelia kissed to seal their marriage, she caught sight of her reflection in the ballroom mirror, happy, whole, surrounded by people who'd chosen to love her. Edward Blackwood had called her trash. He'd been wrong about everything. 1 year later. Amelia ran into Edward at a charity gala 1 year after the wedding. She was there with Julian, wearing a gown that cost more than her first apartment, her grandmother's emerald ring catching the light. Theo and Arthur were at home with a babysitter, probably staying up too late playing video games. Edward was across the ballroom, looking diminished, older. His second bankruptcy was finalized 2 months ago. He was working as a mid-level manager at someone else's firm now, his name no longer carrying weight in rooms like this. He saw her and froze. Amelia felt Julian's hand find hers under the table, not possessive, just present. "Do you want to leave?" Julian murmured. "No." Amelia squeezed his hand. "I'm fine." And she was. Edward made his way over eventually, inevitably as gravity. He looked at Amelia, at Julian, at the ring on her finger that announced she'd moved on completely. "You look happy," Edward said. It wasn't accusatory, just sad. "I am," Amelia replied simply. "I'm sorry," Edward's voice cracked, "for everything. I know it doesn't matter now, but I need you to know I'm sorry." Amelia looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing but mild pity. This man had once been her whole world. Now he was a stranger who shared some history. "I forgive you," Amelia said, surprising herself. "Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger was exhausting. I'd rather spend that energy on people I love." Edward nodded slowly. "Your sons, are they—" "They're wonderful," Amelia cut him off gently but firmly, "and they're not yours to know." "I understand." Edward looked at Julian. "Take care of her." "I intend to," Julian said quietly, "for the rest of my life." Edward walked away, and Amelia watched him disappear into the crowd. Julian turned to Amelia. "How do you feel?" "Free," Amelia said, and meant it. Finally, completely free. Julian pulled her onto the dance floor, and as they swayed to the music, Amelia thought about her grandmother Margaret, the woman who'd stolen a brooch during a revolution and given her granddaughter the freedom to build a new life. "This is not just jewelry, it is your freedom." Margaret had been right. But freedom, Amelia had learned, wasn't just about escaping what hurt you. It was about building something so beautiful that the past became irrelevant. And as Julian spun her under the chandeliers, her sons safe at home, her company thriving, her heart finally trusting, Amelia Hawthorne knew she was free.